It's great to welcome back to the program today Johann Hari, who is the author of multiple New York Times best-selling books. The new book is Magic Pill: The Extraordinary Benefits and Disturbing Risks of the New Weight Loss Drugs. The book is out today. Johann, it's so good to have you back on.
Oh, David, I'm so happy to be with you. Cheers.
So let's start with, what's interesting about this book is it also relates to your personal experience. You started to use, I want to make sure I'm pronouncing it right. Is it Ozempic or Ozempic? What's the correct
Um,
pronunciation?
so the correct pronunciation is Ozempic. Sorry, for people who don't know, that's the extremely annoying jingle in the adverts. It's Ozempic. Yeah,
Ozempic. So
yeah.
you started using this concurrent with your research and writing of this book. Talk to us about your path. You started using it. Why? What were the side effects? What were the results?
I'll never forget the moment I learned about the existence of these drugs, because from the moment I learned about them, I felt so conflicted. It was the winter of 2000 and, sorry, I'll say again. It was the winter of 2022, and it was that moment when the world was opening up again, and I got invited to a party for the first time in ages, and I decided to go. In the Uber on the way there, I felt a bit kind of self-conscious because I gained quite a lot of weight during COVID. I was quite fat at the start, and this party was being thrown by an Oscar-winning actor, and I felt like it'd be a bit awkward. And then I suddenly realized, oh, loads of people I know gained loads of weight during lockdown. In fact, most people. Maybe they're all going to gain weight. It's going to be fascinating to see these Hollywood actors with a bit of chub on them. So when I arrived, it was really weird. It's not just they hadn't gained weight, everyone was gaunt, everyone was visibly thinner. Everyone looked like their own Snapchat filter, like cleaner and clearer and sharper. And I was stumbling around in a bit of a daze, and I bumped into a friend of mine on the edge of the dance floor. And I said, huh, looks like everyone really did take up Pilates during lockdown.
Right.
And she laughed, and I didn't know why she was laughing. And she pulled up on her phone an image of an Ozempic pen, and she said, "Well, it ain't Pilates, right?" And I didn't know at the time what it was. I didn't know that we now had a new kind of weight loss drug which works in a completely new way, which causes the average person who uses it to lose 15% of their body weight. And in fact, the next in this class of drugs, which will be available next year probably, causes the average user to lose 24% of their body weight. And I immediately felt really conflicted because look, I'm older now than my grandfather ever got to be. He died when he was 44 of a massive heart attack. Loads of the men in my family get heart disease. I knew that being obese as I was makes it much more likely you'll get heart problems, and in fact makes over 200 known diseases and complications more likely. So I could immediately see, wow, if there is a drug that really reverses or massively reduces obesity, there's potentially huge positive health benefits there. But I also thought, wait a minute, we've seen this story before. Every 20 years or so, a new miracle diet drug is announced. We're told it's going to change the world, save us all. There's always a stampede to take it, and they always discover it causes some kind of horrendous side effect that means it has to
Mm.
be pulled from the market. I thought, well, is that likely to happen again? So, really, to understand this, I went on this big journey all over the world. Like you say, I took the drug to write about it, and I went on this huge journey from, you know, Iceland to Minneapolis to Okinawa in the south of Japan to interview the leading experts on these drugs, the biggest defenders, the people who created it, the biggest critics of these drugs. And it's kind of weird. I'm sure this will emerge in our conversation, David, but at the end of it, I know much more about the extraordinary benefits and the 12 disturbing risks, much more about what it's going to do for the culture. But to totally level with you, I'm still pretty conflicted. The truth about these drugs is genuinely complicated.
So you start taking it the first time, and it's a self-injectable for people who may or may not know. What happens the first time?
It's the weirdest feeling. I woke up 2 days after I first taken it, and I was lying there in bed, and I thought, oh, I feel something really weird. What is it? And I couldn't locate in my body what it was. And then I realized I had woken up and I wasn't hungry.
Mm.
I don't remember that ever happening to me before. And I went to, there's a diner near where I live, and I went up there and I went in and I ordered what I used to order for breakfast every morning. It was a big brown roll with loads of chicken and loads of mayo in it. And I had like 3 or 4 mouthfuls, and I just wasn't hungry anymore. I was full. And that just kept happening every time I ate. I just got full really quickly. It's like kind of shutters come down on your appetite. And obviously, around that time, I was interviewing the leading scientists about, well, what is happening inside me. And one of the things that's very disconcerting about these drugs is we actually don't know quite what they're doing to people. There's a few things we do know. If you ate something now, David, um, your pancreas would, after a little while, produce a hormone called GLP-1. And GLP-1 is basically part of your body's natural signals, just going, hey, David, you've had enough, stop eating, right? It's like the
Right.
brakes, basically. But natural GLP-1 only stays in your system for a few minutes and then it's washed away. What these drugs do is they inject you with an artificial copy of GLP-1 that stays in your system not for a few minutes, but for a whole week, which is why, you feel so full so quickly. But initially, it was thought this was an effect primarily on your gut, right? It's a hormone created in the gut. But we now know you have GLP-1 receptors not just in your gut, but in your brain. And that from interviewing the leading neuroscientists and doing a deep dive into their work, it's increasingly clear these drugs actually work by changing your brain. There's a huge debate about how and why, which brings with it a whole other set of benefits and risks.
Mm.
But it makes you realize it's a much more intimate transformation than it might seem at first.
Fundamentally, it seems as though what we're talking about is appetite suppression, right? I mean, whether it's happening in the gut or the brain or in both, and in what's happening physiologically, we're basically talking about making people not hungry.
Yeah, actually, most of the experts I spoke to said appetite suppression is not the right way to frame it,
Mm.
which surprised me because I would have thought of it exactly the way you just did. It's more that it boosts satiety. So satiety is a word we don't use that often in English, but we all know basically what being sated is. It's when you've just had enough and you don't want any more. We all feel sated sometimes, whether it's sex or food or whatever it is. And it turned out this is a core concept for understanding two really important things. Because at the start, I wanted to understand both the drugs and how we got here, right? Because we're in this bizarre and unprecedented situation. You're slightly younger than me, David, but I was born in 19, I'd really urge everyone to just stop for a moment and Google photographs of beaches in the United States in 1979 and just look at them for a minute. When we look at them, they seem really strange because everyone in them looks to us to be skinny or jacked, right? And you look at it and go,
Mm.
well, where was everyone else that day? What's going on? And then you look at the population figures for the United States. Obesity was extraordinarily low in 1979. Then between the year I was born and the year I turned 21, obesity doubled. And then in the next 20 years, severe obesity doubled again, right? This has never happened before in the entire history of the human species. You have 300,000 years where obesity is exceptionally rare. And then, literally in my lifetime, this explosion to the point where now 42.5% of Americans are obese. Why? What happened? And the answer lies with this concept of satiety and with a very specific change. Um, we eat completely differently to how human beings ate before us. Um, if you think about people like my father who grew up in Switzerland, this change, this huge explosion in obesity happens in every country that makes one change. It's not where people suddenly become lazy or greedy or lack willpower or all these other stigmatizing things we say. It's where people move from eating a diet that consists mostly of fresh whole foods that were prepared on the day to eating a diet that mostly consists of processed and ultra processed foods, which are built out of chemicals in factories in a process that isn't even called cooking, it's called manufacturing. And it turns out this new kind of food affects us in a completely different way. And to understand it, there's an experiment that was done just up the street from where I am right now in New York that really explained it to me. It's done by a brilliant scientist called Professor Paul Kenny, who's the head of neuroscience at Mount Sinai here. And it's a very simple experiment. He got a load of rats and he raised them in a cage, and they had nothing to eat but the kind of healthy, natural foods that rats evolved to eat over thousands of years. And when that's the only food they've got, rats will eat when they're hungry and then they'll just stop. They never made themselves fat or overweight. They had some kind of natural nutritional wisdom that said, hey guys, you had enough. Then Professor Kenny introduced them to the American diet. He fried up some bacon, he bought a load of Snickers bars. Crucially, he bought some cheesecake and he put it in the cage alongside the healthy food. And the rats went crazy for the American food. They would literally dive into the cheesecake and eat their way out and just emerge just completely slicked with it. Um, and they ate and ate and ate and ate. And all that natural nutritional wisdom they'd had with the kind of food they evolved for just vanished. The way Professor Kenny put it to me is within a couple of days, they were different animals and they all became quite seriously overweight. Then
Mm.
Professor Kenny tweaked the experiment again in a way that feels a bit cruel to me as a former junk food addict. He took away all the American food and left them with nothing but the healthy food. And
Yep.
he thought he knew what would happen, that they would eat more of the healthy food than they had in the past. And that would prove that this kind of food expands the number of calories you eat. That is not what happened. Something much weirder happened. Once they'd had the American diet and they were given the healthy food back, and that's all they had, they refused to eat it. It was like they no longer recognized healthy food as food. It was only when they were literally starving that they went back to eating it. Now, this is happening to us. I call this experiment Cheesecake Park, and we all live in Cheesecake Park now, right? We're eating a diet that undermines our ability to ever feel full. And what these drugs do is they give you back your sense of fullness, but they bring with them a different set of risks.
Is the general use of these among those you know and maybe yourself that once one reaches their target weight, you stop using the medication, or is it thought of as a maintenance ongoing medication?
It's a maintenance medication. Now, this is contested for reasons I'll explain, but no, at the moment, the advice is if you stop taking the drugs, you go back to how you were before. So it's more like, say, blood pressure medication. It's not a cure for the problem, it's a treatment for it. Now, there do seem to be some people anecdotally who are taking the drugs, radically changing their habits and, behaviors, and then coming off and maintaining a lower weight, but they do seem to be a minority. The only studies we have of that at the moment are by the drug companies who obviously have a vested interest in
Yeah.
you taking the drugs forever. So we're going to be a little bit skeptical about that. But it does seem most people regain the weight when they stop.
I mean, it seems the problem is that the caloric deficit that's caused by the feeling of fullness will get you to lose weight, certainly. But over the long term, is it going to see you consuming a number of calories that is not actually the right number of calories for one size? And what will it do to nutritional requirements? I mean, it seems like that may be a concern from long term use.
Yeah, there's 12 big risks of these drugs that I go through in the book. One is exactly what you allude to, malnutrition, right? Some people take some people take too high a dose, don't get enough calories and get malnutrition, and that's really a serious problem. And in fact,
Yep.
someone in my family was in that position. She just was taking it and was just literally barely eating.
Mm,
That's quite separate from the issue around eating disorders, which is probably my of all the 12 concerns the thing I'm most worried about. So yeah, there's a huge array of risks along with extraordinary benefits to the drug. It's one of the things that's so complicated about this. In a funny way, if we want to think about the risks and benefits, I think it actually helps to think about a parallel area of science because these drugs, people have only been taking them for a couple of years for obesity, although people have taken them longer for diabetes. So I think it helps to look at up to now, it's been very hard to lose huge amounts of weight and keep it off without some external intervention. It's possible, but surprisingly few people have been able to do it.
yeah.
The intervention that's worked best has been bariatric surgery, things like stomach stapling, gastric sleeves. And I think if you look at that, you can see some of the benefits and risks. So, bariatric surgery is a horrendous, grueling form of surgery. 1 in 1,000 people dies during it. It's no joke. But in the aftermath, the reason people go through it is because of the staggering health benefits of reversing or reducing obesity.
Right.
If you have bariatric surgery, in the 7 years that follow, you are 56% less likely to die of a heart attack, 60% less likely to die of cancer, 92% less likely to die of diabetes related causes. In fact, it's so good for your health, you're 40% less likely to die of any cause at all. And
Mm,
it's increasingly clear that these drugs incur similar benefits. They move you in a similar direction. If you take them and you started with a BMI higher than 27, your risk of a heart attack or stroke goes down by 20%. It's obviously a
right.
cause very close to my heart, like literally close to my heart now I think of it. So there's those benefits, but I also think you begin to glimpse some of the risks when you look at bariatric surgery. After you have bariatric surgery, your risk of suicide quadruples, which seems
Mm,
really odd at first. Why would that be? Some of it I think will be the grueling after effects of the surgery, which don't apply to these drugs. But I actually think a lot of it is something, one of the things I found most challenging, which is what these drugs do, and clearly bariatric surgery does, is they interrupt your eating patterns very profoundly. You can't eat like you did before. And what that can do is bring to the surface some of the deep underlying psychological drivers of your eating all along. So I had this
mm,
weird moment. I was it was 7 months into taking the drug, and I was in Vegas. As you know, I'm writing a book about a series of crimes that have been happening there, and I was researching the murder of someone that I knew and loved. So it was a difficult thing to do. He was an amazing person. And I really on autopilot, I went to the KFC on West Sahara that I've been to like 1,000 times. And I went in and I ordered what I would have ordered a year before. I ordered a big bucket of fried chicken. And I sat there and I had a chicken drumstick. And I realized, oh, I can't eat this, right? It's funny. Colonel Sanders was there on the wall looking down at me like he was saying, what happened to my best customer? Um, and I suddenly thought, oh, I'm just going to have to feel bad, right? Now, this can be a good process. Bringing those emotions to the surface can mean you deal with them in a better way than drowning them in saturated fats, to be sure. And there's definitely other psychological things going on that I talk a lot about in Magic Pill, but I do think that can be a very painful transition. I do think it's one of the reasons why a significant number of people taking these drugs seem to become depressed. There's even concern about suicidal ideation. Those are both minorities if they're happening at all, but it does seem to be significant, and lots of doctors are
Yeah.
warning about it.
One of the things that is different about obesity societally and culturally is that it is seen by many as more of a moral failing than a broken ankle, for example, or cancer, maybe, although some cancers are linked to lifestyle choices. And so maybe that isn't a perfect example. Or I think you get the point that I'm going at, which is that to some who have a sort of strict father morality understanding of the world, they would see such medications as unfair in some way. You're cheating to some degree in a way that maybe a statin for cholesterol or something else wouldn't be seen. What are you seeing in terms of that aspect of it and the cultural understanding of these medications?
I totally understand where that comes from because to my surprise, I felt that about myself.
Mm,
When I was started taking the drug, I felt like I was doing something immoral, like I was cheating.
right.
And this is strange. Where's this coming from? And I think what these drugs are leaching out is some of the kind of deep stories we have in our minds and in our culture about obesity, where I think we can think about them differently. So if you think about the idea of one of the deepest conceptions we have about obesity is that it's a sin. In the 6th century, Pope Gregory I is the first person to outline the seven deadly sins. One of them is gluttony, always depicted with a very overweight person who's, eating in a way that looks grotesque. And that that's so deep in our culture that because the only forms of weight loss we admire are ones that follow the old pattern of what happens to sinners. You've got to be punished, you've got to go to hell, then maybe we let you come back from hell. Think about that repulsive game show, the world's biggest loser,
Yeah.
where very severely obese people compete in very physically dangerous ways, do extreme forms of exercise and so on, to be the biggest loser or to lose the most weight, right? It's like, oh, if you've been obese, you're a sinner, but you go through hell, you torture yourself, we see you cry and sweat, then we'll forgive you and go, okay, you've done your best, right? So that's a very deep prototype. Also, there's just cheating. You know, in this culture, we live in what's called an obesogenic environment, an environment that makes it very easy to be obese and very hard to not be obese.
Mm,
And in that environment, lots of people are every day making sacrifices and enduring pain to not be obese. They're depriving themselves, they're doing painful forms of exercise. And I can well understand to them, someone like me who started taking Ozempic, looks how I imagine Lance Armstrong looked to a cyclist, right? It's like, screw you. I put in all this effort to get this, and you inject yourself once a week in the leg, and you get all these benefits that I get through almost nothing. But I think by drawing these ideas to the surface, we can begin to see. I actually think there is a contest, there is a competition going on here, but it's not me versus my neighbor. It's all of us against the food industry and the forces that have made us obese in the first place. Professor
mm,
Michael Lowe, who's a brilliant professor of psychology at Drexel University in Philly, said to me, these drugs are an artificial solution to an artificial problem. Processed and ultra processed foods dig the hole, the drugs fill the hole. They give you back your satiety, but bring them with them all these other risks, as we mentioned. When we understand it that way, we've sort of got, you realize what we've got to do. Firstly, those of us who've become obese have to make a difficult choice. We have to weigh the risks we should certainly try losing weight without these drugs, but if that hasn't worked for you, and it won't have worked for most people, fails for 90%, you have to weigh the risks of ongoing obesity, which are shocking, actually. I was surprised by the science on that, quite how bad it is, against the risks of these drugs, which are significant. So that's the first thing. And then secondly, we've got to deal with the underlying factors that have put us in this choice in the first place. I went to countries where they're not facing that choice. Japan, there's almost no obesity. There's literally almost no childhood obesity in Japan
Mm.
because they didn't allow processed food and the processed food industry to hijack their children and screw them up. We can make those changes too if we want to, but at the moment we're in this trap, and this is the kind of rusty, risky trapdoor that those of us who are obese are being offered.
The book is Magic Pill: The Extraordinary Benefits and Disturbing Risks of the New Weight Loss Drugs. The book is out today, and we've been speaking with the book's author, Johann Hari. Johann, congratulations on the book. We're going to be following it.
Hooray. Thanks so much, David. I always enjoy talking to you.